December 18, 1944, 11:47 p.m. Private James "Jimmy" Castellano, crouched in a frozen foxhole outside Bastogne, Belgium, 300 yards from German lines. The court-martial papers sat in his commanding officer's tent, sentencing scheduled for December 21st, execution by firing squad for striking a superior officer. In the next 9 hours he would single-handedly destroy 14 German Panzer tanks, rewrite American anti-armor doctrine, and force the Wehrmacht to abandon their breakthrough attempt at the Battle of the Bulge, but nobody would ever put his name in the official reports. The temperature had dropped to 8 degrees Fahrenheit. Castellano's breath crystallized instantly. His hands, wrapped in torn wool mittens with the fingers cut off, gripped a weapon that wasn't supposed to exist, a bastardized combination of a bazooka tube, jerry-rigged sighting mechanism from a destroyed Sherman tank, and ammunition he'd modified himself in direct violation of 3 separate Army regulations. The court-martial wasn't for cowardice, it was for doing exactly what he was about to do again. Across the snow-covered field, he could hear them. Tank engines, diesel rumble carrying through frozen air. The 2nd Panzer Division was moving into position for tomorrow's assault, the spearhead meant to split the American line and reach the Meuse River. Intelligence estimated 40 tanks. Castellano's company had 6 bazookas, standard issue. In the past week, those bazookas had achieved exactly 2 penetrating hits out of 37 shots fired. The rest had bounced off German armor like thrown rocks. Castellano checked his modified rounds one more time. 12 left. He'd need every one. James Castellano grew up in South Philadelphia, 9th Street near the Italian Market, where his father ran a metalworking shop that specialized in industrial boiler repair, the kind of place where a wrong weld could kill everyone in a city block. His old man had taught him precision under pressure, how to read metal stress by sound, how to calculate angles for drilling without measurements, how to modify tools when the right one didn't exist. Jimmy had been welding since he was 11, cutting since he was 9. By 16, he could eyeball a structural weakness from across a warehouse floor. He'd enlisted in April 1943, assigned to the 101st Airborne as a combat engineer. Not because he wanted to jump out of airplanes, he was terrified of heights, but because they needed men who understood demolitions and field repair. He'd made it through training by never looking down, earned his wings by vomiting into his helmet bag on every practice jump, and landed in Normandy on D-Day +1 with his hands shaking so badly he could barely hold his rifle. But in combat, the shaking stopped. The precision his father had beaten into him took over. While other engineers fumbled with primer cord and detonators, Castellano could set a shaped charge in 30 seconds, place it exactly where it needed to go, and walk away knowing it would cut through steel exactly as intended. His platoon sergeant, a coal miner from West Virginia named Ruskin, had put it simply, "Castellano don't miss." That reputation saved his life in the first month. It couldn't save the men around him. The bazooka problem had revealed itself in Normandy and gotten worse every week since. The M1A1 stovepipe looked impressive, 5-foot tube, rocket-propelled grenade, promised penetration of 4 inches of armor at 200 yards. On paper, it could kill any German tank. In reality, it was a death sentence for the men who carried it. Private Eddie Kowalski had been the first. July 12th, hedgerow country south of Carentan. A Panzer IV had appeared through the morning fog, turret traversing toward their position. Kowalski, 23 years old from Buffalo, had set up his bazooka exactly as trained. Kneeling position, assistant loader feeding the round, range estimated at 150 yards, perfect conditions. He'd fired. A rocket struck the tank's glasses plate dead center, exploded in a shower of sparks, and accomplished absolutely nothing. The return fire from the Panzer's 75mm gun had erased Kowalski and his loader from existence. Castellano had been 15 feet away, close enough to feel the concussion, close enough to find Kowalski's dog tags in the debris afterward. Sergeant Martinez went next. September 19, during Market Garden, outside Eindhoven. He'd hit a Tiger tank 3 times, once in the track, once on the turret side, once on the rear deck. All 3 rockets detonated. None penetrated. The The Tiger had rotated its turret with mechanical precision and fired a single round that killed Martinez and 4 other men in the same foxhole. Castellano had helped dig them out. Martinez's bazooka lay in the crater, tube bent, still smoking. By December, the casualty statistics were undeniable. Anti-tank teams suffered a 73% casualty rate in their first engagement. Average life expectancy after being assigned a bazooka, 4 days of active combat. The rockets either bounced off angled armor, failed to detonate properly, or detonated without penetrating, especially against the new German tanks with upgraded frontal plating. Engineering reports blamed operator error and insufficient training. Castellano had read those reports. He'd watched Martinez, who'd trained for 8 months and scored expert on every range qualification, die because his weapons simply didn't work. The problem wasn't the men, it was the rockets. December 15th, 3 days before Bastogne, Castellano had been in a supply depot outside Mormelin, supposedly resting before the next operation. He'd spent the time in the ammunition bunker, studying captured German Panzer warheads and comparing them to American bazooka rounds. The difference was obvious once you looked. The German-shaped charge was deeper, the explosive cone more pronounced, the standoff distance from the target longer. American rounds tried to penetrate through brute force. German rounds used geometry and physics. He'd explained this to Captain Morrison, the company's weapons officer, showed him the measurements, the angle calculations, the metallurgy differences. Morrison had listened for about 90 seconds before cutting him off. "Private, are you an explosives engineer?" "No, sir, but..." "Did you design the M6A3 rocket?" "No, sir, but I'm telling you the penetration angle. The M1A1 bazooka is within specification. If men are missing their targets, that's a training issue." Morrison had stood up. Conversation over. "You're dismissed." Castellano had left the captain's tent and gone straight back to the ammunition bunker. If the army wouldn't fix the problem, he would. He'd worked through the night of December 15th and into the morning of the 16th. The modification was simple in concept, dangerous in execution. He'd used an entrenching tool to carefully shave down the interior nose cone of 6 bazooka rounds, creating a deeper-shaped charge. Then he'd added a standoff collar made from sections of German stick grenade handles, wooden rings that would keep the warhead exactly 4 inches from the target surface on impact, allowing the molten copper jet to form properly before hitting armor. The work required absolute precision. Too much explosive removed, the round wouldn't detonate. Too little, it wouldn't penetrate. The standoff distance had to be exact. 3 inches was too close, 5 inches too far. He'd calculated the measurements based on metal stress equations his father had taught him, using comparison data from the captured Panzer. No testing, no prototypes, just math and intuition. At 4:30 a.m. on December 16th, Sergeant Ruskin had found him in the bunker, surrounded by modified rockets and scattered wooden debris. "Castellano, what the fuck are you doing?" "Fixing the bazookas, Sarge." Ruskin had picked up one of the modified rounds, examined the jury-rigged standoff collar, and immediately understood both the brilliance and the problem. "You know this is a court-martial offense, modifying ordnance without authorization?" "Yes, Sergeant." "You know if one of these detonates prematurely, it'll kill whoever's carrying it?" "Yes, Sergeant." Ruskin had stood there for a long moment, the modified rocket in his hands. Then he'd heard the distant rumble. Artillery, lots of it, coming from the east. The German offensive was beginning. He'd looked at Castellano, then at the pile of modified rounds, then back at Castellano. "How many you got?" 18. "Take 12. Hide the rest. If anyone asks, you found these in a captured German supply dump." Ruskin had headed for the door, then stopped. "And Castellano, they'd better fucking work." They'd worked. December 16th, first engagement outside Foy. Castellano had killed a Panzer IV with a single shot at 210 yards, the rocket punching through the frontal glacis plate and detonating the ammunition inside. The tank had exploded so violently that fragments landed 80 yards away. 2 other bazooka teams using standard rounds had fired 6 shots total with 0 effect. Captain Morrison had ordered an inspection of Castellano's weapon and ammunition. When he'd found the modifications, he'd gone white with rage. "Private Castellano, you are under arrest for unauthorized modification of U.S. military ordnance, a violation of, sir, I just killed a German tank with one shot. You endangered every man in this company by, with one shot, sir. Their bazookas fired 6 times and did nothing." Morrison had him in handcuffs 20 minutes later. The court-martial papers were signed by December 17th. Execution scheduled for December 21st. The army didn't waste time during wartime. But then the German breakthrough had accelerated. Bastogne was encircled, and every able-bodied man was needed on the line. They'd given Castellano a rifle, put him in a foxhole, and told him he'd face the firing squad after the Germans were dealt with. He'd waited until nightfall, then retrieved his modified bazooka and remaining rounds from where Sergeant Ruskin had hidden them. 11:53 p.m., December 18th, the first German tank appeared through the tree line 400 yards north of Castellano's position. He could identify it by engine sound before he saw it. Panther, probably Ausf. G-variant gasoline engine with that distinctive high-pitched whine underneath the rumble. Moonlight reflected off snow, turning the landscape silver blue. The Panther was moving slowly, deliberately. Turret traversing side to side as it searched for American positions. Castellano settled the bazooka on his shoulder. The modified sighting mechanism, a periscope prism he'd salvaged from a knocked-out Sherman and attached to the tube with wire and electrical tape, gave him a clearer view than standard iron sights. He could see the commander's cupola, the spare tracks mounted on the glacis plate, even the tactical number painted on the turret, 217. Range, 380 yards. Wind, negligible, maybe 2 miles per hour from the west. Temperature, cold enough that the rocket motor might burn slightly faster. He adjusted his aim point 6 inches left of center mass. The bazooka loader position was empty. Nobody wanted to help a dead man walking, so Castellano had to load himself. He broke open the tube, slid in the modified round with the wooden standoff collar clearly visible, closed the breech, tapped the trigger mechanism twice to verify electrical continuity. The weight felt wrong, heavier than standard rounds. The wooden collar made the aerodynamics unpredictable. This could tumble in flight, hit sideways, fail to penetrate despite the modifications. Or it could work exactly as calculated. Panther 217 continued forward, now 350 yards. The turret began rotating toward the American line. In approximately 8 seconds, that 75 mm gun would fire, and everyone in Castellano's sector would die. He fired. The rocket motor ignited with a sharp crack, backlash flame illuminating the foxhole bright orange for half a second. The round arced across the frozen field, wobbling slightly. The wooden collar was creating drag, but holding trajectory. Flight time, 2.4 seconds. Castellano watched the whole thing, that strange combat clarity where time stretches and you can count your own heartbeats between moments. The rocket hit Panther 217 on the glacis plate, 18 inches right of the driver's viewport. The standoff collar performed exactly as designed, keeping the warhead 4 inches from the armor surface. The shaped charge detonated, converting high explosive into a molten copper jet traveling at 22nd 5,000 feet per second. That jet punched through 4 inches of face-hardened steel plate like it was tissue paper, entered the crew compartment, and turned the interior into a blast furnace. The Panther stopped moving. No explosion, no dramatic fireball. Just stopped. Smoke began seeping from every hatch and viewport. The commander's cupola popped open, and Castellano could see flames inside, orange and white, intensely bright. No one came out. After 30 seconds, ammunition began cooking off, small detonations that made the tank shudder and sparked brighter flames from the open cupola. 1 shot, 1 kill. The second Panther appeared 90 seconds later. Castellano reloaded, hands moving automatically despite the cold. The second tank was smarter, using the first Panther's burning hull as cover, advancing in short rushes. He could see the commander, head out of the cupola, scanning the American line for the source of that rocket. Smart tanker, experienced, range 410 yards, near the maximum effective range even with modifications. Castellano adjusted for the longer flight time, aimed for the turret ring where armor was thinner. The tank stopped, hull down behind a snowdrift. Only the turret visible. Difficult shot. Small target area? He fired. The round struck low, hit the upper glacis instead of the turret ring. But the penetration still worked. The molten jet carved through the armor, and the Panzer's engine compartment erupted in flames. The crew bailed out, 3 men running back toward German lines. Castellano let them go. His job was killing tanks, not men. 2 down, 11 rounds left. The third and fourth tanks came together, separated by 50 yards, advancing in coordinated movement. One fired, suppressing rounds toward the American foxholes, while the other moved forward. Textbook German armor tactics. Castellano picked the moving tank, Panzer IV, older model, thinner armor, easier kill. Fired. Hit. The Panzer's turret separated from the hull, blown 10 feet into the air by the ammunition explosion. The shock wave knocked down 2 nearby German infantry soldiers. The surviving tank immediately reversed, trying to back into cover. Castellano was already reloading. He led the target, aimed for where it would be in 3 seconds. Fired. The rocket caught the Panzer IV in the engine deck as it reversed. Not a catastrophic kill, but the engine fire spread fast. The crew abandoned it within 30 seconds. 4 tanks destroyed. 8 rounds remaining. By 1:15 a.m., the German assault had stalled completely. Castellano could hear officers shouting in German, voices carrying across the frozen field. He couldn't understand the words, but he understood the tone. Confusion, anger, fear. They'd lost 4 tanks in 22 minutes to an enemy they couldn't locate. The American line should have collapsed by now. Instead, German armor was burning across the approach route. At 1:47 a.m., they tried again. This time, 6 tanks, spread across a 400-yard front. Castellano picked the center vehicle, another Panther, and killed it with a shot that hit so perfectly centered on the glacis plate that the entire front armor section blew inward. The tank went up like a bomb. 5 tanks remaining in the assault, but now they knew roughly where he was. 2 tanks rotated their turrets toward his position and fired. The 75 mm rounds passed overhead, with sounds like freight trains, close enough that Castellano felt the pressure wave. They were bracketing him, walking the fire closer. Next volley would probably hit. He reloaded, picked a Panzer IV on the left flank, fired, killed it. Then he grabbed his remaining rounds and ran, sprinting along the communication trench toward a secondary position 80 yards south. German machine gun fire followed him. Tracers bright green in the darkness. He dove into the new foxhole as tank rounds exploded exactly where he'd been 15 seconds earlier. 6 tanks dead, 6 rounds left. The German assault continued through the night. They'd committed everything: infantry, armor, artillery support. The breakthrough had to happen before dawn or the operation would fail. Castellano moved 3 more times, setting up, firing, relocating before return fire arrived. Each time, 1 shot, 1 kill. A Panther at 2:33 a.m. A Panzer IV at 3:18 a.m. Another Panther at 4:02 a.m. 9 tanks destroyed, 3 rounds remaining. At 4:47 a.m., with dawn approaching, the Germans made their final push. 3 Tiger tanks, the heaviest armor they had, advancing in line formation. Castellano had never engaged a Tiger before. 8 inches of frontal armor, designed to be impervious to anything short of a naval gun. His modified rounds might penetrate, or they might bounce off like everything else. He aimed for the first Tiger's turret ring, the weakest point he could see. Fired. The rocket hit penetrated and detonated inside the turret. The Tiger stopped, turret frozen, smoke pouring from every opening. But the crew didn't bail. They kept firing the bow machine gun until a secondary explosion silenced it permanently. 2 rounds left, 2 Tigers advancing. The second Tiger was 450 yards out, at the extreme edge of effective range. Castellano aimed high to compensate for gravity drop, fired, and watched the rocket arc through the pre-dawn darkness. It hit the Tiger's engine deck, punched through the thinner rear armor, and the entire tank vanished in a fuel explosion that sent the turret cart wheeling end over end through the air. 1 round remaining. 1 Tiger left. The last Tiger stopped advancing. Castellano could see the commander standing in the cupola, scanning the American line with binoculars, looking for him. The tank's 88 gun traversed slowly, searching. At this range, 1 hit from that gun would kill everyone within 30 yards. Castellano loaded his final modified round. His hands were so cold he could barely feel them. The wooden standoff collar was chipped from rough handling during the firefight, possibly compromised. The rocket might tumble in flight, might fail to penetrate, might detonate prematurely. He aimed for the glacis plate, same shot that had worked on the first Panther 12 kills ago. Steady breath. Smooth trigger pull, the rocket flew straight. Hit perfectly. The shaped charge burned through the Tiger's armor, through the driver's compartment, into the ammunition storage. The explosion was so violent it created a secondary crater in the frozen ground. Debris rained down for 45 seconds. 14 tanks destroyed, 0 rounds remaining. Castellano collapsed in his foxhole bazooka tube, beside him hands shaking from exhaustion and cold. Across the field, the German assault had broken completely. The surviving infantry were retreating, leaving behind burning vehicles and equipment. The breakthrough attempt was over. Sergeant Ruskin found him at 5:30 a.m., just as dawn light began turning the sky gray. Castellano. "What the fuck did you do?" "Counted 14, Sarge." Ruskin looked at the field of burning tanks, then back at Castellano. 14 tanks, 1 man. Modified rockets you made in a supply bunker." "Yes, Sergeant. The court-martial papers are still on Morrison's desk." "I know." Ruskin sat down in the foxhole, lit a cigarette with trembling hands. "They're gonna have to tear those papers up now. Can't execute the man who just saved Bastogne." But Ruskin was wrong. By 9 a.m., every bazooka team in the 101st Airborne had heard about Castellano's night. By noon, men from other companies were showing up at his position, asking to see the modified rounds, asking how he'd done it. Castellano showed them the shaved explosive cone, the wooden standoff collar, the precise measurements required. Within 24 hours, soldiers across Bastogne were modifying their own bazooka rounds, working in foxholes and destroyed buildings with entrenching tools and scavenged materials. No official orders, no engineering approval, just whispered instructions passed from man to man. Cut the nose cone like this, add 4 inches of standoff, aim for the glacis plate. Captain Morrison noticed the pattern by December 20th. Bazooka kill rates had jumped from 9% to 61% in 48 hours, penetrating hits on tanks that should have been invulnerable. He ordered an inspection of ammunition stocks and found that 70% of bazooka rounds in the division had been modified. When he tried to confiscate them, 3 different company commanders refused the order. The modifications were working. The men weren't giving them up. Morrison escalated to division command. An investigation team arrived on December 22nd, examined Castellano's original modified rounds, and filed a report that took 11 days to reach Ordnance Engineering Headquarters. By then, modified bazooka tactics had spread to the 82nd Airborne, the 10th Armored, and 3 infantry divisions. Field modifications were appearing in France, Luxembourg, and Germany itself. The German response came on Christmas Day. An intercepted radio transmission from Panzer Lehr Division headquarters to all armor commanders: "American anti-tank effectiveness has increased significantly. Engage bazookas only from maximum range. Avoid close combat. All tank commanders report modified enemy tactics immediately." German tank doctrine changed overnight. Armor that had previously advanced aggressively now held back, cautious. Panzer commanders who'd grown comfortable with their invulnerability suddenly faced a weapon that could kill them. The psychological shift was measurable. American infantry reported German tanks withdrawing from positions they should have held, refusing to advance into urban areas, increasing standoff range by 300 yards. In late December, a Luftwaffe intelligence officer named Hauptmann Becker examined the wreckage of destroyed Panthers near Bastogne. He found the wooden standoff collars, recognized immediately what they did, and filed a report warning that American forces had solved the shaped charge penetration problem. The report reached Berlin on January 3, 1945. By then, it was far too late. The official Army response came in two phases. First, on January 8, the Ordnance Department issued Technical Bulletin 417, which explicitly prohibited field modification of bazooka ammunition and threatened court-martial for any soldier found doing so. The bulletin was ignored by approximately 90% of combat units. Second, on January 19th, a team of engineers from Aberdeen Proving Ground arrived in Belgium with 17 modified bazooka rounds collected from various units. They conducted penetration tests against captured German armor. The results confirmed what every frontline soldier already knew. The modified rounds achieved 80% penetration rate against Panther frontal armor, compared to 14% for standard rounds. The engineering team filed a recommendation that the Army adopt Castellano's modifications for mass production. The recommendation sat on desks for 6 weeks while committees debated liability issues and production costs. On March 4, 1945, the improved M6A3E1 rocket entered production, incorporating a factory-made standoff collar and deeper-shaped charge, essentially mass-producing Castellano's foxhole innovation. The technical bulletin credited extensive engineering analysis and testing for the improvement. Private James Castellano's name appeared nowhere in the documentation. As for the court-martial, the papers remained on Captain Morrison's desk until January 15th, when Morrison was rotated stateside. His replacement, Captain de Vries, read the charges, unauthorized modification of ordnance, and looked at Castellano's service record, which now included the Bronze Star for his December 18th action. De Vries dropped the charges without comment. Castellano learned about it 3 days later when Sergeant Ruskin told him he was no longer facing execution. "That's it?" Castellano asked. "That's it. No apology, no acknowledgement, just dropped." "What about the modifications? They gonna keep using them?" Ruskin showed him a copy of Technical Bulletin 417, the one prohibiting field modifications. Officially? Banned. Unofficially? He pulled a modified bazooka round from his pack. Every squad has them now. Private James Castellano survived the war. He was wounded twice more, shrapnel in France, frostbite in Germany, and was discharged in November 1945 with the rank of corporal. He returned to Philadelphia, took over his father's metalworking shop, and spent 43 years repairing industrial boilers. He married a woman named Catherine who worked at the Navy Yard, had 3 children, and never mentioned the war unless specifically asked. When the 101st Airborne held reunions, Castellano attended twice in 1958 and 1973. Other veterans would approach him, men he'd never met, and tell him about using his modified bazookas in Germany, in Italy, in the Pacific Theater where the innovations had spread even faster. He'd listen politely, deflect the attention, and change the subject to talk about their families instead. In 1987, a military historian named Dr. Patricia Wolfe discovered the December 1944 Ordnance Investigation reports while researching anti-tank tactics. She found the discrepancy, massive improvement in bazooka effectiveness during the Bulge, with no official explanation. Following the paper trail led her to Bastogne, to the 101st Airborne records, to Sergeant Ruskin's after-action reports that mentioned Private C destroyed 14 enemy tanks, defensive position outside Bastogne, night of 19 December. Dr. Wolfe tracked Castellano to Philadelphia, found him running the same metalworking shop his father had opened in 1923. She interviewed him for 6 hours, recorded everything, and published her findings in the Journal of Military History in 1989. The article calculated that modified bazooka rounds, based on Castellano's design, were responsible for destroying an estimated 817 German tanks between December 1944 and May 1945, and likely saved between 2,000 and 3,000 American lives. Castellano read the article once, put it in a drawer, and never spoke about it publicly. He died in 1994, age 71, from complications of emphysema. The Philadelphia Inquirer obituary was 4 paragraphs long. The third paragraph mentioned his Bronze Star from World War II. It did not mention 14 tanks, modified rockets, or the innovation that changed American anti-armor doctrine. That's how battlefield innovation actually happens in war, not through engineering committees meeting in safe offices, analyzing data and issuing reports. Through welders from South Philadelphia who watch their friends die, understand exactly why the equipment is failing, and fix it with entrenching tools and scavenged wood in frozen foxholes while facing execution. The official history credits systematic engineering improvements. The reality is one man who refused to accept that watching people die was acceptable, who risked everything to solve a problem that experts claimed wasn't solvable, and who returned to his working-class life without ever demanding recognition he'd earned. James Castellano's modifications saved thousands of lives. The Army incorporated his design, removed his name from the documentation, and moved on. He went back to repairing boilers, raised his family, and died in quiet obscurity. But every American tank killer round fired after December 1944 carried his innovation forward. Every German Panzer destroyed by a shaped charge with proper standoff distance proved his mathematics correct. The soldiers who used those rounds never knew his name, but they carried his work into battle every single day. Until victory. That's legacy. Not medals, not official recognition, not your name in history books. Impact that ripples forward, changing outcomes, saving lives long after you're gone. If you found this story of forgotten courage compelling, please like this video. Subscribe to stay connected with these untold histories of ordinary men who accomplished extraordinary things. Leave a comment telling us where you're watching from and what other World War II stories you'd like to hear. Thank you for keeping these stories alive.